It's like a shark, NATO, except with poop.
I'm not happy.
I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable.
I care. That's it.
It makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system.
Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
There's insanity in the control room.
Round the nation, Waldorf Nation, hey everybody, welcome to the show. It's Monday. Welcome back. We've got a new week. Apologies, but I'm gonna be a little Jeb Bush
Please clap.
low energy today. I'm not feeling the greatest, but the show must go on, and go on it shall. We're gonna talk about Republicans, conservatives thinking that Biden's gonna ban your burger. They're gonna touch your meat.
I like my meat tight. Tighten up my meat.
So instead of tightening up your meat, they're going to tighten up your supply of meat. Oh, no. Oh, God. Here we go. Yes, we're going to break down that kerfuffle. We also got more MAGA chuds, of course. One getting in trouble for not wearing their mask. Interesting. We got an ex-producer of the Alex Jones show, as well as somebody who worked at OAN, talking about basically how the right wing lies for money. That's fun. And then Republicans are getting upset. Of course. Well, of course they are. They're getting upset that the fiscal conservatism thing isn't working anymore. Interesting. Fun times. All right. So, hey, you know, we got those stories. We're going to get to it. We'll have a little fun. Hopefully I'll feel better in the middle of the show. But hey, you know, it is what it is. All right. Yeah. Right wing lies for money. Who knew? Who would have thought? But we'll break it down. All right. The Daily Mail. Bastion of real news. It's not fake news. It's real news. The best news. Greatest news. Tremendous. Eat local. It tastes better and it's better for the environment. I mean, it depends, but yes. I mean, you really have to look at like who uses better ingredients, etc. Not all companies are created equal. I have a horror story. I don't know if I should save it for another time or like after the show, like a special or something. But I can tell you that I did eat at a local restaurant that was disastrous and terrible and broke I don't know how many health codes. It was probably the worst thing I had ever eaten in my life. Worst place. Literal bugs all over the place. It was awful, awful, awful. Local place, at least not where I live now, but where I lived as a kid. So, but generally, yes. No more burgers. I know. Sad. They're gonna take away our burgers. Oh no. All right. Anyway, what's this about a burger ban? Stay tuned. Stay tuned. And share your video or share this video with your friends, your family, everybody. I told you it's not feeling great today, so I'm all over the place. But you know what? Let's do it. The hamburgers have to register. Good question. Good question. All right. You know what? Why don't we dive into it? Again, please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Super chats always welcome. Hello to all of you on Twitch here listening upon. Thank you for subscribing 2 months of Prime. S Bloom, thank you for the 6 months of Prime. Prime Gaming, you can sign up. And basically, if you already have Prime, just hit the subscribe button for your free subscription, and you don't have to pay anything. That just goes to help the show. So always welcome too. All right. With that said, let's do it. You know I have to make these. I have to do this.
Tighten up my meat.
That's right. It appears that the Democrats want to touch your meat. At least that's according to a recent Fox News segment that has right-wingers up in arms. They are very worried about Democrats coming for their meat. They're going to take my meat away. They're going to take my hamburgers. Over the weekend, pundits from Fox News and politicians as well on social media talking about the Biden climate plan and how somehow, the Biden administration is going to limit old Americans to one single hamburger a month. In fact, I got a video here from Fox Business host Larry Kudlow. Take a look.
Speaking of stupid, there's a study coming out of the University of Michigan which says that to meet the Biden Green New Deal targets, America has to, get this, America has to stop eating meat, stop eating poultry, fish, seafood, eggs, dairy, and animal-based fats. Okay, we got that? No burgers on July 4th. No steaks on the Barbie. I'm sure Middle America is just going to love that. Can you grill those Brussels sprouts? So get ready. You can throw back a plant-based beer with your grilled Brussels sprouts and wave your American flag. Call it July 4th green. Now, I'm making fun of this because I intend to make fun of it. This kind of thinking is stupid. It comes from a bunch of ideological zealots who don't care one whit about America's well-being. Not one whit.
We'll talk about projection there. Total projection. There's a bunch of idiots who don't care about America. Oh my God. My burgers. No, Joe Biden. Let me tell you what, Joe Biden. You pry my meat from my cold, dead hands.
I like my meat tight.
Oh my God. There's so much here to make fun of. So much. Notice how, by the way, ever since Biden has won the election, and it's pretty indisputable at this point, okay, Fox News has immediately slipped back to their old patterns, running any BS story ever. Again, they're talking about total, absolute nonsense. This is tan suit gate level stuff, okay? This is not based on actual reality. Approximately 0 people in the Biden administration proposed any sort of meat ban. It's ridiculous. And here's where it came from. By the way, this came from an article in the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail, I believe, is a Murdoch publication over in the UK. And as the Washington Post reports, Biden's plan does not include any limit on meat eating. And so this is the Biden climate plan, which is, to me, relatively weak. I don't think that it will do what's necessary. And by the way, doing what's necessary doesn't involve banning meat either. Look, let's be honest. A reduction would be nice. I'll get into the details about that a little bit later. But still, here's what Biden said on his plan. Quote, I see an opportunity to create millions of good-paying middle-class union jobs. I see workers laying thousands of miles of transmission lines for a clean, modern, resilient grid. Good. Hey, just ask the people in Texas if they would be interested in something like that, especially after that, snowstorm in which they did not weatherize their gas pipeline system, leaving millions of people out in the cold. I see worker capping hundreds of thousands of abandoned oil and gas wells that need to be cleaned up, and abandoned coal mines that need to be reclaimed, putting a stop to the methane leaks and protecting the health of our communities. All good stuff. I see auto workers building the next generation of electric vehicles and electricians installing nationwide for 500,000 charging stations along our highways. I see engineers and construction workers building new carbon capture and green hydrogen plants to forge cleaner steel and cement and produce clean power. Again, I don't have any problems with that. I see farmers deploying cutting-edge tools to make soil of our heartland the next frontier in carbon innovation. By maintaining those investments and putting those people to work, the United States sets out on the road to cut greenhouse gases in half by the end of this decade. That's where we're headed as a nation, and that's what we can do if we take action to build an economy that is not only more prosperous, but healthier, fairer, and cleaner for the entire planet. And none of that did he say anything about eating meat, or I should say not eating meat, cutting meat out of your diet. They just said nothing about that. Okay. But nonetheless, Republicans, they have decided, no, this is about meat. The Daily Mail is correct because they're a bastion of journalism on the right. And so here you have Representative Lauren Boebert telling the president, quote, stay out of my kitchen. And you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene calling him, quote, the Hamburglar. Hey, Republican women, speaking of the kitchen, what the hell are you doing out of the kitchen? I mean, you don't believe in feminism. You don't believe in equal rights for women, right? Then what the hell are you doing outside the kitchen? Get back in the kitchen and make your man a sandwich. I mean, if that's what you really believe. And by the way, stop talking bad. Stop talking down to your better, which happens to be a man, Joe Biden. I'm just saying. Those are your beliefs. Now, it gets worse. You've got You've got Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who put this on Twitter. So this is the graphic. This is great. Up in your grill, Biden's climate requirements. So this is being shared all over social media on the right. Cut 90% of red meat from their diet. Max 4 pounds per year. One burger a month. Oh my God, only one burger a month. How dare he? Jeez. Oh my God. Terrible. Not in Texas. Nope. This is ridiculous. He's not only is Governor Greg Abbott a complete and utter dipshit. He is an idiot. He is a liar. These are complete and total lies that are being spread around for a purpose. And understand that this is how right-wing media works. This is not an accident. This is not wow, he's going to ban burgers, so I'm protecting freedom. No, what this is that this is how the right-wing echo chamber, this is how disinformation filters down. It starts from a right-wing publication, in this case, the Daily Mail, doing a piece on what if we were to do certain things. And by the way, that is based on a study out of Michigan. And so let me get to the details on that. The study of Michigan, from Michigan, the University of Michigan specifically, made a study on the impact of limiting meat consumption on the climate. So they took the question of, well, okay, what if Americans did reduce their meat consumption? What would happen? How would that impact the environment? Now that study, again, that study found that, yeah, you would reduce emissions if you reduce not only, meat consumption, but also agribusiness in general. Okay. So instead of clearing out land to, use for cattle grazing and all that stuff, and raising cattle as much as we need, if Americans reduce their consumption, then you wouldn't have all that grazing land that would be necessary, and it would be replaced by forests and things like that. So that's very basic, okay? And so what the Daily Mail did is that they took that study and extrapolated the data that, or the conclusion that they wanted out of it, and started spreading that around as part of Biden's climate agenda. It's ridiculous. This was 100% planned, 100% orchestrated by the right wing. It's nothing more than pure propaganda. And of course, as such, it's spread all over the right wing. And now you have unhinged people who by all rights should be screaming on the streets with like the sandwich board out there with, the end is near, that kind of stuff. That's where these people actually belong. And yet, for some reason, they're on TV or they're in Congress. Again, the study has no link to the president's plan whatsoever. In fact, one of the Michigan researchers behind the study told MassLive.com that he, quote, has no idea what Biden's plan has to say about our diets because it says nothing. Because Joe Biden is again, he's actually pretty vague on specifics here. There's not a lot of specifics to this plan. Okay. That's not to say that some Democrats, including Joe Biden, haven't advocated for changes to our, agricultural industry to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But again, no lawmakers have seriously proposed banning meat consumption. It's just not a thing that is happening. Okay. And in fact, that kind of, okay. So we can reduce consumption, and that would have significant impacts. In fact, according to a study by, according to data echoed by Janet Ranganathan, Vice President for Science and Research at the World Resources Institute, if you were to substitute a little bit more chicken instead of beef, that would reduce emissions. She says if people limited consumption of just beef to the equivalent of 1.5 hamburgers per week, not month, and that's about half of what the average American in the United States currently eats anyway, the planet could actually end up supporting a population of 10 billion people without having to turn more forest into farmland. It would also avoid about 5.5 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions each year, which is the equivalent of emissions from 2 countries the size of India. On top of that, if people adopted more sustainable ranching practices and turned over 1 million square miles into forest, they could actually offset emissions from food that is grown that would make the agriculture industry around carbon neutral, according to Richard White, a colleague of Ranganathan at WRI. Okay, now, that said, that's the data on that. It's really fascinating, but it is just a suggestion. Nobody's actually saying ban hamburgers. What they are saying is, hey, if you want to eat less, that would probably be better for the environment. But, you could. It would be nice. But you don't have to. And besides, what ends up missing from this conversation about people changing their dietary habits is actually the fact that 100 corporations are responsible for 70% of the emissions in the United States for carbon. I'm just saying, okay, I think the shift to putting the onus on individuals for their eating habits, while not changing anything else. I mean, here's the sad truth. It's actually cheaper to go and get a burger at McDonald's than it is to go and actually eat healthier and to buy vegetables and fresh fruits and things like that. And so we put incentives to buy meat, to buy things that are, full of corn and corn syrup and all that. Um, because again, we're incentivized to do that because it makes money for these corporations that are heavily subsidized by our tax money. Okay, and so that is the issue. Okay, so these corporations are, and the government subsidies that fund them, and that are put forward by politicians that want to get approval ratings from like farmers and things like that. Well, they end up causing a lot of the problem here. And so shifting the blame to the individuals, knowing all that, knowing all the context is counterproductive when, again, it's really down to corporations, lobbyists, and things like that are the major drivers of our emissions in this country. Okay. You're trying to pin a larger problem on regular working people who might not have a choice, or might make the more fiscal choice when it comes to their family and buying those, cheap processed meats. And so, yeah, as some of you point out, cheap fast food burgers are not the result of a free market. It's true. So much subsidization in there. And again, I believe, and I don't know the number on this, but I'm pretty sure that we subsidize the cattle industry quite a bit. But let's get to more conservative outrage. All right. The conservative outrage. Here's Donald Trump Jr. saying this. Well, I'm pretty sure I ate 4 pounds of red meat yesterday. That's going to be a hard no for me. Something's going to be hard. Something's going to be really hard for you. Wrecking my colon to own the libs. It's ridiculous. It's nonsensical. It's bullshit. Because again, that's all they got. But I do have to give a little bit of credit here from Chuck Schumer. Why would I ever do that, you ask? Well, I actually made a funny joke. And I know a lot of people didn't quite get it, because Chuck Schumer's not known for his comedic chops. But in response to this, in response to Larry Kudlow, remember earlier he said, well, you're going to throw back a plant-based beer. I got news for you. Beer is pretty plant-based. I mean, does Larry Kudlow believe that you make beer out of animals? I mean, look, what's in beer? Now, you got barley, hops, water, that's sometimes sweet. And the only living thing that's in it is yeast for the fermentation process. Not exactly animal-based, is it? I mean, again, I don't think Larry Kudlow's smart enough to realize that yeast is a living organism. But that mostly beer is plant-based. Oh, ridiculous. They're so dumb. Well, here's what Chuck Schumer said about this. Excited to be watching the Oscars with an ice-cold plant-based beer. Thanks, Joe Biden. Oh, boy. Fun times. Fun times. All right. Anyway. Yeast is a bacteria. True. All right. But hey, 3 out of 5 for effort for Mr. Schumer. Not bad. Not bad. Is Guinness put through a filtration process that uses pork products? Generally, though, that's the filtration process, not the actual, ingredients in the beer. And yet, you could replace... I'm assuming you could replace that. Do some beers have animal products? Does it necessarily have to do that? Is it in the punch? Oh, for God's sakes, guys. Y'all, we're missing the point, okay? Moving on. A MAGA insurrectionist is really sorry that she made fun of the court. Okay. Now, indicted MAGA rioter Rachel Powell has formally apologized to the United States District Court for the District of Columbia after apparently mocking the face mask order. Oh, this is fun. A filing made by Powell's attorneys on Monday claimed the pro-Trump rioter wishes to apologize to this honorable court at a pretrial services for her poor choice and her unwise conduct when it came to following the court's mask mandate. Fun. So now wait a minute. What do the masks have to do with the court? Well, apparently, as part of her partial release, Chief Justice Beryl Howell had actually ordered her to wear a mask if she goes outside. All right. Well, hey, that makes sense, right? Now that again it makes sense because it's for the sake of the public, to protect the public, all that wonderful stuff. So hey, I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. All right. However, this had to have been too much for this MAGA patriot because earlier this month she had been filmed at a bookstore wearing a mesh mask. So the mesh mask has, you can imagine, has big holes in it, which doesn't really do well for the whole point of wearing a mask. Does nothing, actually. But she realizes, I'm pretty sure she knew that it did nothing because that was the point. It was a big middle finger to libs and pretty much everyone else. It's one of those things that anti-maskers do when they're, asked to wear masks, other than flip out or attack somebody or curse them out or whatever. Some will get cheeky, think you're smart by like wearing the mask up to here or wearing like a ridiculous mask, like saran. Well, yeah, don't saran wrap your face. Not smart, but I wouldn't put it past them. But they would, do stupid things, wear stupid masks just to be stupid. And of course, like children, because they're acting like children, they do cry when they get caught being stupid. Powell's attorneys then argued that it wasn't their client's intention to mock the court's order. And instead, who was doing it? It was Lana Del Rey. It's her fault. Wait, how's it Lana Del Rey's fault? Apparently, she had worn a similar looking mesh mask. So now, look, a lot of people got after her about it. And then she's like, actually, yes, it's a mesh mask, but it also has plastic behind it. So it actually does protect, even though it doesn't look like it. Oh, okay. All right. Makes sense. Her plastic, again, her mask was plastic on the inside. Fair enough. Now, the attorneys wrote, quote, while clearly unwise, creation and use of this mask at issue was not designed to mock the court or its release condition. And yet, that's unfortunately what happens. I'm not, of course, buying it. And neither did U.S. District Court Judge Royce Lamberth. He wrote that, quote, no reasonable person could think that the defendant's mask complied with that condition imposed to ensure that the defendant would not pose a risk to the health and safety of the community when she left her house. I really don't think that these MAGA insurrectionists care at all about the safety of the community. In fact, I think that they are a danger to the community. Not good people. One recent example is another MAGA insurrectionist who punched a cop in the face. I mean, I'm just saying, like, that's what he did. On Friday, Judge Lampert also ruled that Scott Fairlem should not be released. And now let me show you who this guy is. So that's Scott Lambert. Looks like a real stand-up patriot. He was indicted last month on 12 different charges, including assaulting a federal officer, entering or remaining in any restricted building or grounds with a deadly weapon and acts of physical violence on Capitol grounds. Multiple tipsters alerted the FBI after spotting him in videos from the insurrection, which showed the gym owner carrying a collapsible baton he picked up during the riot. In the video, he said, quote, "What do patriots do? We disarm them and then we storm the Capitol." You want to talk about danger? Yeah, I would say these people are the danger. They're not patriots, and they're not looking out for the people. They're not, again, during the riot, they didn't wear masks, which again was during the pandemic. And I mean, they also don't wear masks outside. They don't care about other people. They don't care about their fellow human beings. They don't care about their community. They don't care about their country. If they did, they'd actually wear a goddamn mask. Fake patriots, that's what they are. Fake patriots, all in service to a wannabe dictator, wannabe fascist. Just like I keep saying, they're not sending their best people. Trump wasn't sending his best. Sure wasn't sending their brightest. Keep these people in jail where they belong, because it turns out they are the actual danger to the community. They are the danger. All right. Stay right here. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We got more stories. Don't worry. We got an ex-OAN Alex Jones producer that is going to talk about his experience in the right wing and the thing that motivates these show hosts the most. Stay right here around the nation. We'll be right back.
There's insanity in the control room.
Who's got a hammer? Tighten up my meat. I like my meat tight.
Masturbate all day long.
Oh, there was so much I could have added to that meat segment. So many jokes. Oh well. That's okay. That's okay. I just get myself in trouble anyway. Anyway, welcome back to the show. Around the nation right here, Waldorf Nation. A couple of super chats here. Shannon Burt says, go get yourself some plant-based beer. Yes. Might be hard to find. Beer has always been plant-based. What an idiot. Gabby Mathis, thank you for the super chats. And, you know, look, I am glad that you're all pretty smart. So I have an incredibly intelligent audience, great audience, the best, actually. I love you all. And so I thank you so much, by the way, for, for helping the show, being a part of it and correcting me. I really do appreciate it. So gonna need some more people to hit the like button. Thank you. Yes, we do. Absolutely. Let's get on that. I should make a Discord. People from the community can help run it. All in good time, friends. There's only so much that I can do at once. All right. Let's just say we're working on it. Over here on Twitch, by the way, thank you, Seo Samalin. I don't know if I said that right, but thank you for the tier 1 sub. Much appreciated. All right. Whew. Let's dive into it, huh? Shall we? Conservative media is trash. Most of it's clickbait garbage. That's based on no factual information. I did a story, of course, earlier today that talked about how the Daily Mail decided that it would lie about Joe Biden's climate proposals, and now conservative media is on fire about like a meat ban. Real weird stuff. But that's not just me saying that conservative media is trash and full of lies, even though, again, I just did. And I say it often. But no, it is actually coming from people who worked there, ex-employees, ex-conservatives, who took a look at what they're putting out in, conservative YouTube spaces and media channels, and they're saying, "Wow, this is a bunch of lies." In fact, last week I also talked about how producers who would work for One American News Network were appalled at some of the fringe stories they were made to do. Now, for clarity, I don't care if somebody has, a conservative ideology and they approach stories from give a conservative point of view to certain stories. That's fine. I do stories from a progressive point of view. So I understand. It's totally fine having a point of view. The thing that's not fine is when you start lying about what reality is. And so this is what had been happening on the right wing. Now, a former One American News Network and InfoWars employee named Kalen Robertson recently went further. He went on CNN to talk with the host of Reliable Sources. Normally it's Stelter, but it was somebody else that was hosting. And I believe it's somebody, Avalon. I can't think of the first name now. But Kalen Robertson, went on to discuss about how conservative media is not about discussing news or talking about information or even giving a conservative perspective. No, it's basically all about how can we scare our audience into buying our stuff. Take a look.
I ended up becoming a correspondent for Rebel Media, of which I obtained millions of views. And my boss always told me, and the bosses of these other organizations always told me, that we should never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And if we can get people angry, and if we can get people upset, then we can make more money, we can make more profit, and we can drive the algorithms to keep pushing these videos. It was completely devoid of any realism or any journalism. We would go to quote unquote no-go zones in 2018 when Fox News would hype up that whole situation, and we would create conflict and then selectively edit it to look like those areas were far more dangerous than they were. Those videos would obtain millions and millions of views. Again, I regret that massively. The only reason I did it was because I was radicalized by those people and felt like it was for the greater good, and it was a bit of a cult, but those people profited massively from it, and it was always about pushing disinformation. Alex Jones, who I spent a lot of intimate time with, and a lot of the people that employed me, told me openly that they thought the whole Pizzagate stuff and the pedophile stuff and all the stuff that they were pushing is something that they don't really care about or really believe in. But it whips up their audience into anger, and it gets them to buy products on their news nights.
Wow. There's a lot that you can get from that. And you know what? Good for this guy for coming out and saying, hey, man, I was radicalized into this. I believed in this stuff. And turns out the people that were spreading this disinformation that sucked me into the alt-right pipeline, they don't actually believe it. It's only about money. It's always been about money. And so, yes, of course it's about money. Everybody right now, understanding the audience, is like, yeah, no shit. Yeah, of course it's about money. Duh. You think Alex Jones actually cares about the news? Oh, no, of course not. No. Does he really care about the deep state globalists that are taking over and turning the proxy? No, of course not. No, it's about getting paid. Yeah, we know that. And the thing about Alex Jones that makes him dangerous is not just what he says, which again is dangerous, but it's the fact that he has natural charisma. He is a natural entertainer, man. He says batshit things, but you know, he does so incredibly well. He's fun to watch. Now, that's again, despite him admitting that he is playing a character, it's almost no different than Stephen Colbert, right? And I know people like freak out when I make that comparison, but Stephen Colbert used to play a character, a crazy right-winger, but he played it incredibly well. Alex Jones has taken that caricature to an extreme and is playing this character. That said, unlike Stephen Colbert, Alex Jones is also a piece of shit in real life. In fact, he recently buzzed his ex-wife's house in a helicopter. That's insane. But again, this first and foremost, Alex Jones is about making money. OAN, as I reported on last week, they're also there to make money. And so some of the stories that they were pushing were because of the CEO, Dennis Herring. So they called this H stories, right? H stories were basically stories that were pushed by the CEO from the top that did not involve any sort of factual sourcing. So the source material at one point in one story, for example, that they were talking about literally led to a right-wing chat room. And that's it. But the thing is, these stories are designed to whip up their viewers into a frenzy. And so that they will, basically, their brain will stop working and that they'll tune in for more. Like, oh my God, what are the deep state socialists saying? Trying to do this time? Oh, they're trying to prevent us from eating a hamburger. Oh my God. Oh, get your hands off my meat. I gotta have my meat.
Tighten up my meat.
It's weird. It's super weird. But it works. It works incredibly well. Now, for me, a good rule of thumb for media is that if somebody tells you that they're right 100% of the time and that they're the only truth teller out there, then you should, not believe them. You should probably go somewhere else because you're not going to get factual information. They're out to milk you for cash. I've never said that I am 100% right about everything. No, you know what? I do. Yes, I do my best to try to lay the facts out there and to give you my perspective. Absolutely. I try to give you the facts as I know them. That doesn't mean I'm 100% right. Do your research. Correct me if I'm wrong. And a lot of you do. And I do appreciate that. I love it. Because what I want to do is I want to try to give you, again, the facts as I know them and to give you my perspective. It's about perspective. Okay. And so that's what's different here. I'm never going to tell you, no, I'm a 100% right. And if you don't listen to me, you're listening to the sheep. You don't want to be sheep, do you? Tune in. No, it's ridiculous. I'm a believer in progressive policy. Okay. I want Medicare for all. I want a clean environment. I want higher wages. I want things that make sense. And so I've aligned with people that also did the same thing, that also want the same thing. Okay. And my story is a lot like Robertson's story, except that I didn't get sucked down a pipeline, right? I was a viewer of TYT for, a couple of years. And I believed in the progressive policies. I believed in the message. And I was like, you know what? I want to get into this. I also want to talk about these issues. I want to help bring people over to the left, and to see that these policies are worth fighting for, that they're going to help more people. Okay. And for me, my experience with the Young Turks is that, they also believe in that message. And I've never been told, like, for example, by Jank, don't disagree with Jank or Anna. That's bad. No, I could disagree all the time. I've never felt like any of them have been dishonest or have been trying to control any message coming out of the show. No, complete creative freedom. If I want to disagree with Cenk on the network, I'll just be like, you want to debate? And I've seen the Kyle Kalinske versus Cenk Uygur debates about Russiagate. And so that is something that no other network seems to have. You can disagree on these things. And I'm using me as an example because I went from a viewer to a worker. Robertson did the same thing. He went from a viewer of conservative media, of Alex Jones and, InfoWars and OANN to working there. And then suddenly they're telling them, well, it's not actually about the stuff that we believe. No, it's just about it's about making money. It's about whipping people up. We don't actually believe in this stuff. Come on, we're milking some money here. We're getting some money out of this. And trust me, here's the thing about left-wing media. There ain't no money here. There's no money in the left, especially when it comes to criticizing the right wing. There's not a lot there. You can make tons of cash for slamming the left, especially if you're left-wing. There's a lot of money in going after Democrats for the sake of going after Democrats. And I'm not saying that you should never go after Democrats. I'm saying that you should go after Democrats when it's fair to do so. I think there's always plenty of room for criticism. People like Bernie Sanders and AOC, you can definitely criticize them. But there is definitely a lot of money in doing nonstop criticism of, the left, from the left. And so that said, this back to the story here. There's another former One America News Network person that talked to the New York Times. It's Marty Gulligan. He was a producer at OAN before he was fired for speaking candidly to the New York Times. He said that when OAN hired him, he expected to work for an organization that had a conservative slant. Well, again, nothing wrong with having a conservative opinion. There's nothing wrong with, having a conservative perspective. We'll just disagree. And that's part of the discourse. That's totally fine. And look, for part of the time, he was doing normal news rundowns as an OAN producer. But the problem is when they started pushing more fringy stuff that, in his words, had, quote, weird sourcing. Interesting. Now, it was mostly, Gulligan said, coming from the top. And as I said, those were the H stories that they were pushing. Those are the stories that were only meant, of course, to enrage. Those were, all about trying to gather an audience through lying, essentially, and making as much money scaring their audience as they can. By the way, that is by a lot of this stuff that comes from the right. For example, let's take QAnon, right? Who doesn't get outraged when you hear about children being hurt? Everybody. I mean, and in QAnon, you had kind of the perfect conspiracy, right? Kids getting hurt by the globalist elite. Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's not a very popular person. I know. Even among Democrats, okay? Bill Gates, big media, right? Things that they're able to use to push out this narrative that there's this big conspiracy, okay? Going after these people and organizations, and then they'll tell their audience, well, you're special because you know the truth. And they're not just evil because of this and this. They're actually evil because they're part of the giant pedophile cabal. Okay, but here's the thing. Bill Gates is not Bill Gates has got issues, okay? I have issues with Bill Gates funding, for example, private education instead of public education and pushing for charter schools. Not only that, but refusing to share vaccine formulas with poor countries in order to end the pandemic. We should absolutely do that. So there's stuff that Bill Gates does that's ridiculous. But at the same time, no, I don't think he's drinking the adrenochrome of children. It seems pretty ridiculous. Hillary Clinton also not doing that. But however, she did take money from health insurance companies to not support Medicare for all. And so that's the problem that I have. All of this is a far cry from, hey, this is a typical rich, out of touch, selfish person. And it's a big difference from that to going to, well, they're also injecting adrenochrome from children that they've raped. that also want to kill 3/4 of the human race. Big difference there. Okay. But that's, again, the difference from good faith progressive media versus bad faith conservative media like OAN and InfoWars. So some of this stuff is completely unhinged. And the reason that it is because there is a market out there. And they tell people what they want to hear in order to get them to, feel justified in their hatred of certain people or a certain political party, and that they have to continue to invent crazier and crazier and crazier things to continue to justify that hatred. And these companies, these organizations, these people that are influencers, as I should say, or hosts, they get to make a buck. And that's what it's all about for them. That's what they got out of it. Bill Gates reminded us why he still sucks in his latest interview. Oh, yeah. I'm not saying he doesn't suck. He absolutely does. But just not for the reasons the right wing seems to think. All right. Moving on. Let's go to our final story. Republican politicians are getting frustrated that their base is not buying into some of the BS economic arguments anymore, particularly on federal spending. In fact, according to a recent article in The Hill written by Scott Wong, Republicans are having a tough time generating outrage over Biden's multi-trillion-dollar spending agenda as they did over former President Obama's signature initiatives. So now one of them includes, of course, Obamacare. There's a lot of people that were really angry on the right over big spending programs like the ACA. But when they look at Biden's infrastructure plans, for example, which increased federal spending by quite a bit, far, far bigger than Obamacare, the ACA, they just shrug. Who cares? All right. Kind of makes me wonder why the base is so kind of non-committal on that. Maybe the base has changed, or maybe had something to do with the president being named Barack Hussein Obama. Again, when you look at the ACA, and I'm speaking as somebody who's not a fan of the ACA, I'm a fan of expanding Medicare to everybody and enhancing Medicare. So adding like things like vision, dental, etc. The ACA was definitely not enough. It's a step in the right direction, sure. And one of the criticisms from the left of the ACA is that it's essentially the Republican plan. That's what it was. It was the Mitt Romney care, but instead of just in Massachusetts, it was expanded to everywhere in the country. So, but ask the Republican politicians, and they'll say, "Oh no, the reason that fiscal conservatism isn't as popular anymore is because it's not because it was ever really popular among conservatives. Yes, it's very popular among the rich, wealthy Republican donors, but never was really popular among the people." And so, nonetheless, they blame actually populism and Donald Trump. So now, Senate Republican Whip John Thune actually said this, quote, "Unfortunately, fiscal concerns are probably not as important to the GOP base as 10 years ago, and that Trump helped transform the party's priorities." Quote, "It wasn't something that was an important issue for President Trump, and so many of our base voters align themselves to President Trump. It's almost like now debts, deficits, and spending become abstract ideas that a lot of folks aren't paying attention to and should be." Interesting. I'm going to posit this. It's almost as if that didn't actually matter to Republican voters at all. I mean, it never really has. Let's be honest. They don't care. When somebody says, I don't like big government, what's big government? It seems pretty nebulous of a concept. Like, what would you call big government? Well, Social Security? You ask most Republicans, they'll be like, oh, yeah, I'm cool with Social Security. Yeah. Oh, what about Medicare? Oh, yeah, I like Medicare. Again, if you ask people who are on Social Security and Medicare, they're going to say, well, yeah, I generally like Social Security and Medicare. That's not to say that there aren't problems with it. I would say that there's a lot of holes in Medicare that we could plug and we could add in and things like that. But generally, they're pretty happy with the spending on that stuff. And not only that, but U.S. Republicans, are you happy with military spending? They're going to say, yeah, well, yeah, oh, yeah. I love spending $780 billion on the military every year. Fantastic. We love it. Again, it doesn't really matter. What they're actually mad about is some of that spending being towards the poor. That's the big problem in those people. You know what I mean. But anyway, here Thune continues. He says, there was a political evolution, and the fiscal conservative was a core tenet of the Tea Party, got displaced by the more populist elements of the Republican Party. Actually, you know what? The Tea Party started out as raging against bank bailouts. I mean, that's what it started out as. That's where the organic protests came from. And then what happened is that the donor class, they came in and they said, well, there's something that we can take over. That's something that we can exploit. And so from there on, they basically astroturf. They bust in people to suddenly be against Obamacare. And that's really where the Tea Party got its power. Because again, the people that were elected during the Tea Party surge ended up being in favor of corporations and giant bank bailouts and all that stuff. So, but no, they're saying, oh, populist. It's the populist wing of the party. Well, let me kind of point out what the populist wing of the Trump Republican Party is. Bashing immigrants. Essentially. And espousing white nationalist talking points. That's what we see from the populist right. Generally. And, of course, that irritates the corporate donors who realize, oh, yeah, the corporate donors. And they basically say, well, shoot, we make money from black people and from gay people. And turns out they have money. They're a market. So we don't want you to go out and say these horrible things and pass these horrible laws because it makes us look bad, especially when somebody can look up open secrets and show that we have donated to these Republicans. Turns out being shitty to people does not appeal to a business. It's not good for a business to be shown as somebody who supports terrible legislation, hateful legislation. Now, Trump, by the way, did go after companies that were uncomfortable with his rhetoric. And so now, as a result, there's more of a strain in the Republican Party that thinks corporations have gone woke. When in reality, of course, they just don't want to openly fund hatred towards their own customers. They want to be Disneyfied. They want to be like, oh, we're cool, go buy our products. Make no mistake, though, companies aren't left-wing. They're also not really right-wing either. They're amoral. They want to be apolitical. They want to appeal in general to as many people as possible. In order to meet people where they are, which is more culturally progressive, they're going to act more progressive. They're going to put out like, oh, look at us. We're so racial inclusive, et cetera, et cetera. When in reality, they still fund Republican politicians. And that's really what it is. Again, let me give you some examples, right? So, Nike hired Colin Kaepernick. Okay, good. But then Nike also gets caught using slave labor in Asia to make their shoes. Amazon, makes people pee in bottles with their insanely high production rates. But hey, but we pay people $15 an hour. Coke funds Republican politicians and takes $1 billion in subsidies. On and on and on. And so you see what's going on here. They're not woke corporations. They're just marketing, and that's really what it is. And so well, ironically, there's a lot of the Republican base that don't like these companies now that they're putting out those progressive cultural messages, but we're fine with all the other stuff that was happening. Oh, yeah, exploitation in Asia, totally fine. Other countries exploiting profit, that billions of dollars left the government. And of course, there are some, conservatives that were like, oh, I don't like subsidies either. Oh, great. Agreed. I don't like subsidies either. But anyway, these companies still fiscally benefit from the Republican Party, mostly in the form of tax cuts and subsidies. And so that happens to drive debts and deficits more than anything, really. In fact, all the way from the Bush years and the giant Ronald Reagan tax cuts, those tax cuts have cost trillions of dollars. Bush, for example, added even more tax cuts onto it, and then 2 unfunded wars. And now, of course, as a result, the country has gigantic debts. We have crumbling infrastructure, all that stuff. Now, Democrats, by the way, I'm not letting Democrats go. Democrats also spend on corporations. They like corporate subsidies too. And like Republicans, they're also big spenders. Guess what? They also spend money on the military. Again, you had old Democrats that supported the Pentagon budget under Trump. And so, but here's the big difference is the Democrats, while they do all those other things that Republicans do, they occasionally try to raise taxes on the richest Americans. And they'll also throw a bone out to people who are poor, increase food stamp benefits, stimulus checks, things like that. And so, they will try to take care of the poorest. Whereas Republican politicians are like, no, don't you dare put 1 cent towards the poor. All that money needs to go to the rich. All right. And so what John Thune is saying now in bringing this message and in this article itself is saying, stop spending money on poor people. We don't really care about infrastructure. No. We don't like the stimulus checks. We don't like the welfares. Get rid of it all. And we're really mad at our base right now for, ignoring it, for forgetting about all that. And they tie it into worries about the national debt, as they normally do. In fact, Thune said this: I'm very frankly concerned about the level of spending and debt. I think Republicans have got to be the adults in the room and exercise fiscal responsibility that seems to have been absent, lacking the last several years. Again, they're trying to distance themselves from Donald Trump, despite the fact that Trump pretty much did everything that Republicans normally do when they get into office: spend more in the military, as well as cut taxes for the rich. So I don't know where this is coming from, okay? It's pretty ridiculous. But you have more Republicans. Senator Lisa Murkowski, a so-called centrist, right? Said the party is kind of different compared to the early years of the Obama administration. Quote, Tea Party fiscal conservatism is now hard to find, adding that the party base is more strongly conservative on social issues than anything else. And that's, of course, as a result of the culture wars. She also asked, who's the party of fiscal restraint anymore? I don't think either party has ever really been a party of fiscal restraint. It's generally been about the 2 Santas, where I don't know if any of you've heard about that, but basically the Republicans are the Santa Claus for the rich. They give rich tax cuts and deregulation and subsidies for corporations, and the Democrats are the Santa of giving, things to poor people, like affordable health care or more affordable health care, things like that. And so each party, tries to point at each other for being fiscally irresponsible, when in reality, they both have their priorities. And so for me, the problem is not we have a spending problem. No, the problem here is we have an allocation problem. Okay. And the allocation problem is we allocate too much money towards the rich and corporations and in tax cuts. We don't actually allocate enough money to things that actually help people. Okay. And that's the problem. Okay. And even when we do, corporate interests always seem to get in the way. They always need a piece of the pie. That's why our healthcare system sucks compared to everyone else. Why we pay, despite the fact that we pay twice as much for healthcare than they do in Europe, despite the fact that they actually have a more universal system. Okay. And the thing is that the insurance companies have to act as a middleman so they can extract profit from this. And so we can definitely save money by cutting the profit margin out of the equation. That's why I'm in favor of Medicare for all, for example. But there are things that we should do, that we need to do, that cost money. And one of them is infrastructure. Republicans already put out an infrastructure plan that's about $500 billion, which barely touches anything, whereas the Biden administration wants to do a little bit more on infrastructure. And actually, that plan, compared to the Republican plan, which never seems to be popular, the Biden plan is actually much more popular, even with the Republicans. In fact, a Political Morning Consult poll from this month showed strong support among Republicans, Democrats, and independents for Biden's infrastructure spending priorities. 65% of voters were also on board with raising the corporate tax rate in order to help pay for those. The survey found that 42% of Republicans favored raising taxes on corporations. Stephen Smith, a professor of political science at Washington University in St. Louis, said the Republican warnings of 10 and 12 years ago that Obama's agenda would fuel inflation never panned out. As we could see, it didn't. Undercutting the potency of fiscal conservatism as a political message. They really don't care, though. Again, the Republican base never actually cared about fiscal conservatism. The thing is that they were so whipped up by the idea of some of their tax money going to so-called welfare queens, black people essentially, and the poor. That's where they were outraged about. That's why they signed on to go against, any sort of spending on welfare programs, essentially. But then he said, quote, the Republican argument of 2009 that this massive increase in federal spending is going to cause disastrous inflation. It simply isn't an argument that holds water, most economists or the general public. We've never experienced much inflation, still aren't experiencing much inflation, and yet have another economic downturn with massive unemployment and underemployment. I think the public buys the argument the government has an essential role in recovery. Again, if you actually talk about some of these issues without invoking party, some of these ideas, without saying, oh, AOC's for this, or, this Republican politician's for that, generally most people will agree that government has a bigger role to play and wants government to have a bigger role in, for example, taking care of people. It's when you start naming people, Bernie Sanders says this, AOC says that, Biden says this, that's where you get that political partisanship in the way of actually doing real solutions. And again, the reason that I think most Republicans hated the ACA and hated other things like that is not because it was missing some serious things, right? Like a Medicaid expansion or a public option even, which would have been ripe at the time, which then we might actually be talking about a Medicare for all seriously. They would have a serious discussion. But no, we didn't even get any of that. And a lot of it came from the right wing, just hating a black man. So, I mean, that's what we're doing here, okay? It's never been about fiscal responsibility when it comes to Republicans and their voters. It's always been about owning the libs and hating the black guy. All right. All right. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. Wow, that was longer. That was longer than I thought it'd be. So more involved. Hopefully, you enjoyed that. Yes, Obama did make Bush tax cuts permanent. True. In fact, I was gonna mention all that stuff, but I don't think I had time. Okay. Can't even own the libs, right? It's true. True. Gotta go meat. Ends meat. Yes. True.
I like my meat tight.
All right. Thank you so much. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. I'm gonna head out. Maybe feel a little bit better. Thank you all for all the well wishes here, and as well as all the super chats and things. It's very kind of you. I do appreciate you. Maddie, is it Darmo says your show is uniquely independent. We really appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah, it's Maddie. Good. All right. Awesome. Helps that I know how to say that. Zach Sherman says you should make a Discord. Oh yeah, I said that earlier. Sorry, I read that comment earlier. Yes, like before you leave. I would absolutely appreciate that if you could to give us a like before you leave, subscribe if you like the show. Visit our Patreon, patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. All that wonderful stuff. All right, everybody. Thank you. Love you all. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, Nation. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Oops.
There's insanity in the control room.
There's some whores in this house. Wet ass P-word.
Please clap.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
Mike Powers.
Dumps. Big, massive dumps.
Masturbate all day long.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.